Alright, so we're talking more about numbers. We're going to do a quick review with the numbers. And so I'm going to type a number up on the screen. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to say it, think of the number, and then I will give you the answer. Then I'll give you a new number, and then we'll continue on with the lesson. So the first one is 18. 21. Next one is 28. 6. 14. 16. 19. I think I already did that one, but it's 21. 3. 8. 11. 15. 29. 30. Okay, so keep practicing your numbers. You're going to need them. Right now, we're going to look at how to use numbers. And first of all, there are a couple of words that are pretty important to keep in mind. The first one looks like hey, but it is not hey. It's pronounced I. The AY makes an I sound. The H is silent, so it's I. And I means both there is and there are. So in English, if you're talking about one thing, you'd say there is a pen on my table. If there are more than one pens, then you would say there are pens on my table. In Spanish, it's just one word. Hay una pluma en la mesa, or hay dos plumas en la mesa. It's both I. There is or there are is I. It looks like hay. You can remember it because there is hay in the barn. I. There is hay in the barn. The second word, or a combination of words that you need to know, would be the question word cuantos. Right? Cuantos means how many. All question words have an accent in them. This one is over the A. And you end your question with a question mark, obviously. But in Spanish, you also begin questions with an upside down question mark. So cuantos means how many, and there are a few words that go along with cuantos. You have cuantos, you have cuantas as well. So remember that nouns have genders, masculine or feminine, and then you also have to keep in mind whether there's one or more than one. And so here, this is if you're talking about more than one thing that's masculine. This is if you're talking about more than one thing that's feminine. So you may ask yourself, well, what if there is a mix? What if there are masculine and feminine things that we're talking about? For example, a group of guys and girls. Well, if there's at least one masculine thing, you're going to use the masculine word. It doesn't matter if you have 1 million females and one male, you're going to use cuantos. You're going to use the masculine because there's at least one masculine item. So if we want to ask how many of something are there, you have to first ask what is it that we're asking about. Is it masculine or feminine? So if I want to say how many pens are on my table, pen might be pluma. There are a couple other words that you can use, but if we said pluma, pluma, is that masculine or feminine? It's feminine. And so we're going to use the feminine word, cuantas. And so we're going to say, make sure you get your accent, cuantas, which means how many pens are there? Make sure that you end with a question mark, and make sure that you begin with a question mark as well. ¿Cuántas plumas hay? How many pens are there? If we wanted to answer that, we're going to get rid of the cuántas, and we're going to say there are however many pens. So you're going to say I 12 plumas. I forgot to mention that I is there are, but if you want to say there isn't or there aren't, you would say no I. So if I wanted to say there aren't 12 pens, I would say no hay 12 plumas. There are not 12 pens. There are a couple other things that you should keep in mind regarding numbers, and basically has to do with the number 1. As basically everybody knows, the word 1 in Spanish is uno. Alright, but this actually it is kind of weird. When you're counting, the word is uno, but if you want to say one book, you don't say uno libro, it becomes un libro. So the actual number is uno, but when you're saying one and then a noun, if the noun is masculine, as libro is, then uno just becomes un. Alright, essentially you're saying a book instead of one book. Now then, if it's feminine rather than being un, can you guess what it would be? Ooh, yeah, good job. It would be una. So one table would be una mesa. That'd be one table. So if the number 1 comes before a masculine noun, it becomes un. If it comes before a feminine noun, it becomes una. When you're just counting, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then it's just uno. Or how many burritos do you want? And you say 1, it'd be uno. But if you say 1 burrito, it'd be un burrito. So this trend actually continues on to other numbers that end in 1, such as 21, 31, 41, 51, 61, etc., 101, 2,000,001, and on and on and on. So if I want to say there are 21 tables, there are would be I. 21 would be 20, and normally be 21. But what are we talking about? We're talking about tables, and tables are feminine, so it's going to be 21 mesas. Alright, take out a piece of paper. We're going to do a little bit of practice. I'm going to give you a word, then you're going to pause the video, write your answer, and then I'll give you the translation, and you'll compare your translation with my answer, and feel free to correct your answer. So the first question is, how many suitcases are there? Pause the video, translate this, and then I'll give you the translation. Alright, so first we need to ask ourselves, what is it that we're talking about? We're talking about suitcases. The word for suitcases is maletas. Maletas is feminine. There's more than one. So our word for how many is going to be cuantas. Make sure it's cuantas, not cuantos. Make sure you get an accent on that A. Start your question with an upside down question mark. And then the word for are there is I. So how many suitcases are there? And with a question mark. Okay, we're going to answer this, and the answer is going to be there are 21 suitcases. So the word for there are is I. And then 21 is 20, normally it'd be 21. We're talking about suitcases, which is feminine. So this needs to become feminine. So we're going to say 21 maletas. If this were masculine, then we would take off the A altogether and just be 21 libros, books, or whatever you're talking about. Okay, our next practice is I want you to translate this question. How many students are there in Spanish class? Now, you're going to pause the video in just 1 second, but before you do that, you need to realize that in Spanish you don't say Spanish class, you say the class of Spanish. The class of Spanish. Pause the video and translate this. Okay, so we're asking how many students are there in Spanish class. So we're asking about students. Students is estudiantes. And we're asking how many, so the word is either going to be cuantos or cuantas. Estudiantes is going to be masculine because there's probably at least one male student in the class. I think I already mentioned this before, but it doesn't matter if you have 30 girl students, if you have one boy student, it is referred to as a masculine noun. So we're going to say cuantos. Make sure you get your accent. Cuantos estudiantes are there? I. And then in would be en. And then we need to say the class of Spanish. La clase de Español. And we want to answer this by saying there are 17 students in Spanish class. Pause the video, translate that, and then I'll give you the answer. Okay, to answer it, there are is I. 17 is 10 and 7, so 16, I'm sorry, 17 estudiantes in Spanish class, so in the class of Spanish, en la clase de Español.